Awaken to a different world. Virtual volunteering is here. My name is Catherine Parts. I'm a school services specialist, or better known as a hospital teacher, at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. My colleague, Sarah Steinke, and I will be sharing with you the virtual tutoring program that we created after the pandemic started. This has allowed volunteers to stay engaged by providing educational support to patients via virtual platforms. Our goal with this presentation is that you will learn about the process and tools needed to initiate your own virtual volunteering program at your hospital. This session will provide details regarding HIPAA and how to guide volunteer tutors on protecting confidential information when working virtually. In addition, you will learn about the detailed process and integral components involved in setting up a virtual volunteer program. Honestly, this program was created to meet our hospital school needs during the pandemic, and it has opened the door to greater possibilities of how we can provide ongoing learning to our patients by continuing to use some of our volunteers as virtual tutors over the future years. In March 2020, when the pandemic started, the hospital teachers were asked to work from home, and our volunteers were put on standby indefinitely. So just like teachers throughout the world, we immediately learned how to navigate our telemedicine virtual platform, which is Microsoft Teams, and also Zoom, knowing that these would need to be used in order to continue to connect with our patients and help them finish off their 2019-2020 school years. As hospital teachers, we realized that a process needed to be implemented to reconnect with our volunteers so they could continue to provide academic tutoring for our patients. The reasoning for this is twofold. One, we have 2 Cincinnati public school teachers and 3 Cincinnati Children's Hospital teachers who as a team cannot meet the needs of all of our patients. And 2, our volunteers are well trained, making a difference in the patients' days by connecting with them to not only strengthen their academic skills, but also make that personal connection to share stories, jokes, and so much more. The virtual tutor process that we put into place is shown on this process chart. From the start, we reached out to those volunteers who expressed interest in virtual tutoring to the Volunteer Services Department. After that initial connection, an ongoing exchange of information and training took place that we are going to share with you in this presentation. Ultimately, we knew that we wanted the process to work so that each volunteer would be able to provide tutoring services to a patient for 2 to 3 hours per week. First, allow me to share with you a bit of information about our Cincinnati Children's Hospital School Program. We are part of the Center for School Services and Educational Research. We strongly believe that school is an important part of every child's day. At Cincinnati Children's Hospital, participation in educational services helps patients achieve their educational goals while receiving treatments. A team of certified teachers collaborate with the patient's schools on standards-based learning goals, creating lessons and assignments, and assessing students' learning. Individualized lessons and group lessons, that's pre-COVID, are taught by teachers and volunteer tutors throughout the school year and summer. In reflecting on our hospital school program, there are 3 core goals that we focus on. 1, providing normalization for the patients during hospital stays. 2, we strive to help patients develop and maintain academic skills. And 3, we promote a connection as often as possible between our patients and their classrooms and peers. The hospital school program at CCHMC has many volunteers. Each week, 25 to 30 volunteers assisted during pre-COVID days. Currently, we have 8 volunteers who are able to work virtually with our patients. Once again, as a point of reference, in March 2020, the Cincinnati Children's Hospital teachers started teaching our patients virtually. And in August 2020, just in time for the 2020-2021 school year, those volunteers who expressed interest in virtual tutoring were trained and ready to work with patients. Now, becoming a Cincinnati Children's volunteer is a serious commitment. To have a better understanding of the overall training our hospital services volunteers go through, let me first share the initial steps that must be completed before you can volunteer at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. All volunteers must submit an application, come to campus for an in-person interview, fulfill various medical requirements, pass a background check, and complete an online orientation. Additionally, the volunteers must commit to volunteering for a minimum of 6 months and be able to fulfill annual health and safety requirements. Please note that all of these requirements are in place to ensure that our patients and families are surrounded by a safe, knowledgeable team of volunteers during their hospital experience. Once volunteers have completed all of these core requirements, they are placed in specific roles throughout Cincinnati Children's Hospital. For those volunteers working with the hospital school program, a large percentage are university students. Many of our patients love connecting with young, college-aged university students. Not only are they up with the times, they are super helpful with tutoring more challenging subjects and a variety of foreign languages. Important to note is that the university students receive service credit or class credit for their volunteer involvement. Additionally, we typically have 2 to 3 student teachers per school year whose placement is with Cincinnati Children's Hospital School Program. This is a wonderful place to learn and practice a variety of teaching skills and create a lasting positive impact on a child's life. Education is our children's and our patients' future. For them to strive for their goals, we believe that virtual tutoring is a must. Now, due to the changes that we have had to implement at the hospital school because of COVID-19, and even looking into the future when we are able to bring volunteers back into the hospital to work one-on-one with patients, we know that a virtual tutoring option might just work best with some of our patients. In relation to hospital school, an important role it plays in our patients' lives, please allow me to share with you the following messages we received from a couple of parents. We greatly appreciate the comprehensive approach Cincinnati Children's takes with their patients, addressing not only their medical needs, but also their educational needs. This is 1 hour a day when my son can feel like a normal kid. With everything else going on, it is a welcome time. I cannot imagine what it would be like not having school each day and how far behind he would be without this. The teachers see the child within, not the outward transformed appearance produced by various medical procedures and medications. The education program is invaluable to my family and others dealing with very sick children who are fighting for a future of health and well-being. Having shared with you the why behind our need to create this virtual tutoring program, it's time to start our journey and share with you the virtual tutor training process. First, the volunteer office at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center reached out to our hospital school program volunteers to see who was interested and virtual tutoring. They compiled a list of volunteer tutors, and I created and emailed them a survey monkey with key questions related to virtual tutoring. The Survey Monkey question topics focused on their experience with online tutoring, their familiarity and or prior experience with Microsoft Teams, which is the telemedicine virtual platform used at CCHMC, their access to educational resources to use when tutoring, for example, a whiteboard, manipulatives, etc. Their experience with other technology that can be used to enhance lessons. That could be an online whiteboard, math programs, YouTube videos. And lastly, their availability to tutor the same patient for 2 to 3 lessons per week. The tutors completed the Survey Monkey within a week or 2 of receiving it, providing us good feedback that was used for building our virtual tutor training program. Now it was time to schedule our virtual tutor training session. Having asked our tutors to download Microsoft Teams onto their computers, we sent them their email invitation and were ready to get them on board and awaken to a different world, one that revolves around virtual platforms such as Microsoft Teams being used for teaching and connecting with our patients. Well, let the training begin. As the beautiful poet and author Maya Angelou so eloquently stated and lived by, when you learn, teach. When you get, give. To share the finer details of our virtual tutoring program, my colleague Sarah Steinke will now present an overview of the training program we created to prepare our virtual tutors.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for all that you've shared so far, Catherine. Yes, once we have identified tutors that are willing to be involved with our students by teaching them virtually, we train them. I'm going to walk you through the key components of the virtual training that you may want to consider for starting such a program. This training can be provided to a group or to individual tutors. All of our volunteers and students are introduced to protecting confidentiality when they initialize volunteering at the hospital. The preliminary training informs them of what exactly is protected health information and what are permissible versus impermissible uses and disclosures. This training is provided by the volunteer office for those that come to us through the volunteer office and reinforced by our school program. The UC student teachers and tutors that do it for class credit come right to us and we provide that training. This training, if your volunteers or students are not already trained in what qualifies as HIPAA protected information, is what you will want to start with. Your hospital will for sure have HIPAA training resources that you can tap into. Since social media is prevalent, I like to also remind volunteers that it is easy to break confidentiality through technology. If, for example, a tutor sees a social media post about a patient that they are working with on Facebook, if they comment, they're breaking confidentiality. Someone that knows they volunteered at the hospital will realize that the child is in the hospital and that they worked with them. During the virtual training, our goal is to not teach the volunteers what HIPAA is, but to make sure they know how to protect private information during virtual lessons, as this is a whole new world. A college student may not think about how their roommates may pass behind the screen while they're teaching and accidentally see or hear a patient. A retired teacher providing tutoring may have the time and heart to want to do too much for a family and may try to access contact information for a family that is way more than they need to know in order to provide virtual tutoring. We provide basic and practical privacy tips such as these on the screens. We suggest that they find a private room or an isolated space to conduct the virtual lessons. If they can't find a private space, then definitely we highly suggest that they use headphones so no one can hear the patient, and that they face the monitor so that the only one that can see the monitor is themselves, so no one sees the child on the screen. We remind them not to discuss their new virtual tutoring students with any family members or friends. We remind them to only use the information provided by the teacher to contact the family, and then to not press the families for any further information more than what we've already shared with them, and that if they're having connection problems, to come to us to problem solve. Since we do give them some information that's sent to their homes through email if they print anything, which was, when they came into the hospital to volunteer, everything was left at the hospital. But now they have printed information at home about a student, so we've asked them to keep it in a secure place and confidential place away from anyone else that may see it, and then to shred it when it is no longer needed. We have these tips typed up, and we also send those to the volunteers after the training is over for future reference. Our hospital uses Microsoft Teams as the main virtual platform, not just for meetings, but also for telehealth. Therefore, we use Teams a majority of the time for our lessons. So we provide a time to help our tutors become more comfortable during the training. We're able to make our lessons secure, similar to how we send secure emails through our hospital. However, since our lessons are for the purpose of helping a student with educational progress and not for medical treatment, there's little to no confidential elements that are shared during these lessons. We therefore are not restricted to Microsoft Teams, but we can use Google Meet, Zoom, and other virtual platforms. If you've not explored setting up a virtual meeting for a lesson, you may want to check with your hospital. See if there's a recommended platform. Your hospital may have resources that you can access, including training and scripts for communication with families. However, you may be very comfortable with the platform already from personal use. How many of us have set up virtual meeting get-togethers with family that we never did prior to COVID? I know that in my personal life, I use Zoom a great deal, and I find it very user-friendly for lessons as well as for family get-togethers. I do want to warn you that there may be, you may want to check out any platforms very carefully before you use them, because there may be some drawbacks. For example, at the start of the pandemic, Zoom had time limits for lessons, but they removed those time limits, but those have now been reinstated. I think it's about 40-45 minutes. So if your lesson's going longer than that, you're going to be cut off unless you pay an additional cost for a little higher level of a platform on Zoom. Your initial training should include some training on virtual platform or platforms and can be tailored to the needs of the volunteers that are part of that training. During the training, it is especially helpful to make sure the tutors have a few key takeaways that are applicable for any platform you may use. First of all, there are wonderful, concise, and super helpful videos already created on YouTube about any platform. Let your volunteers know that if they are unsure or nervous about any virtual platform, they simply need to search a video that will show them the way. Do they want to know how to use a virtual whiteboard while they teach? They can watch an informative video. Do they want to know how to share the screen back and forth? There's a video tutorial for that. Our virtual tutor training provides a few basic guide points. I find that it's always helpful to highlight the button that needs to be selected when sharing your screen so that the sound can be heard. Students cannot watch a video or hear any sounds on a shared screen if this button is not selected. It is also great to remind volunteers and to model during the training that they want to check in periodically with their student during the lesson to make sure the student can see and hear the lesson. If a volunteer is likely to work with older students, it may be helpful to make sure they know how to share screens to access the same online work together. They may also need a virtual whiteboard, especially for math concepts. You can show them how to use these items and or guide them to videos that will show them how, that are readily available on the internet. After the tutors are shown how to use the virtual platform, now it is time to inform them about how the meetings will be set up. We were advised that a teacher should be the one creating the reoccurring meeting through an email calendar that is then shared with the family and the tutor to join. I provided on this screen some of the pros and cons of the teacher versus the tutor setting up these meetings. Before we had gotten started with our training in our virtual tutoring program, right from the get-go, we met with the director from Volunteer Services to find out what are key things that we should be mindful of. And she said her utmost priority was always safety for the patients. When tutors come to the hospital, and there's, I think, 700 something that come to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, it's usually pretty safe when they go to the rooms of the patients because there's so many people around coming and going from the rooms. The concern with virtual tutoring sessions is that the tutor would be one-to-one in a virtual platform with the student and no one else around. So it's important that we have access to all of their meetings. To prevent a volunteer from doing anything inappropriate, it helps if they know a teacher may join a meeting at any time, and if the teacher is scheduling the meetings and the tutor doesn't have access to schedule the meetings separate from what the teacher is aware of. The negative with the teacher setting up the meetings is that we found at our hospital, Microsoft Teams, since it's hospital run, will not allow the volunteer to enter the meetings without us allowing them to join. So we always have to be available to allow that connection to happen. And so therefore, if we're not available, then they cannot join together. Sometimes that limits when we can schedule those weekend hours and evening hours may be eliminated unless we're able to connect and get them joined together. Another pro is that the teacher can alter the schedule if we're the ones scheduling it more easily, and there's less information that we have to share with the volunteers if they're not the ones scheduling it. It's obviously a con that is then more time involvement and time commitment on our parts to make sure to keep up with that scheduling. It is a good idea to include in the training how to access the calendar appointment from email, especially if your hospital has secure emails, and then how to join the meeting. How will the volunteers know what they should do with a student? During the training, assure the tutors that they will be provided with a student summary sheet that serves as a guide to the key information that can be referred to as needed throughout the tutoring lessons with their patients. Here are the items provided on our student summary sheet. We are including them in case they are helpful to you as well. First of all, we provide the student's first name. Again, in order to keep our volunteers from having more information than they need, we keep off the last name. We provide the grade level. Some students may be in 10th grade, but may be on an IEP, may be functioning more at a 3rd grade level, and the tutors may need to know the functioning level of the student in order to know how to properly teach them. So we share the developmental level. We also share with them all of our contact information so that they know who to keep coming back to for any questions or concerns or any needs to reschedule things or any connection problems. Sometimes the family is okay with us sharing the room phone number or a parent's phone number with permission, and if it makes sense, we will share this information with the volunteer. We have a spot on our student summary sheet to include any suggested materials, maybe some counters or a notebook or a book that we may want the volunteer to have ready before the lesson starts. We include any website login information that they're going to need to help them go into that lesson. We then give them some guidance on what they're to do in the lesson or lessons so they know exactly what to do and they don't have to create the lesson on their own. And finally, we give them guidance on what we want them to tell us in a follow-up email that is sent to the hospital teacher after each session. We ask them to let us know how much time was spent in the lesson. Was it 20 minutes, 5 minutes, and then the child was taken to an MRI? doesn't really matter, just so we know what to put into Epic. When we chart on the lesson at the end, we want to know the actual time spent and how was the engagement of the student. Were they tired? Did they receive Benadryl? Were they highly engaged? Were they somewhat engaged? Did they have difficulty focusing? What was focused on the lesson? Was it just math? And was it addition and subtraction today? Was it language arts? And they read up to chapter 7. Where did they leave off? And are there any questions, concerns, or barriers that we need to address? The first group of volunteers asked us questions through the survey that Catherine had sent out before we started our first training. And they were commonly asked questions that we then incorporated into our training for all future volunteer tutors. Tutors wanted to know what kind of supplies they should have on hand besides the computers. Depending on the age of the student, we may suggest items to count and books, a dry erase board or paper, and a marker to hold up for older students. We were often questioned by tutors about how to engage a student or keep their interest while at the hospital, and especially during virtual lessons. First of all, we assure them that we've seen that there's high engagement during these one-to-one sessions because there's a captive audience and less distractions through the screen. We tell them that having a joke ready or a short inspirational TED Talk or a book may be a great idea. We've heard of teachers and tutors that engage students by what they're wearing, such as a new hat for each lesson. We assure them that we'll be available for ongoing tips and tricks if they have any need as they go on into the future with their lessons. So now the training is over and the volunteers are ready to work with a student. What are the steps that we have to take on any day? We identify a long-term student who has the capability to engage in online tutoring. Why long-term? It is intensive to set all this up, so it works best to connect a student with a tutor for multiple ongoing lessons versus a one-time deal. The next slide summarizes our sign-up process for pairing up tutors and patients. These steps we hope are informative and may help you develop your virtual tutoring program. Once we have a patient who the family acknowledges can be taught by a virtual tutor, one staff member from our program informs the pool of virtual volunteers. A wonderful, free, and easy tool we use for tutors to sign up patients' tutoring sessions is Sign Up Genius. Via secure email, tutors receive the Sign Up Genius link, allowing us to inform the virtual tutors simultaneously, and it helps eliminate long email chains for pairing up tutors with patients. In the sign-up, we indicate the patient's age, subjects to be tutored, frequency of the lessons per week, and approximate lesson time so that the tutors can determine if the student is appropriate for them or not. If the patient needs chemistry help, only volunteers comfortable with that subject then will offer to help. We have some patients who have multiple tutors supporting them on different days with varying subjects. Nayoko, the tutor, may be helping Tommy on Mondays and Wednesdays with algebra, and Miguel, the tutor, may be helping on Tuesdays and Fridays with English. I would like to mention that our student teachers and our University of Cincinnati tutors who are volunteering for class credit and a grade do not sign up, but are directly assigned students by the teachers. The teacher creates the student summary sheet and sends this to the tutor well in advance of any lessons. The tutor can look it over and ask questions. The teacher also creates the calendar appointment and sends out the invite to the patient and tutor or tutors through email. For the first lesson or lessons, the teacher often logs in, if possible, to provide introductions and to make sure the lessons are able to be started without any barriers. After each lesson, tutors are asked to email the teacher listed on the student summary sheet with a summary of the lesson. The teacher uses the information sent via the tutor's summary of lesson email to chart on the patient and see if there are any questions or issues that need to be addressed prior to any future lessons. Updated summary sheets can be sent as needed for future lessons if more guidance is needed, change in lesson plans is needed, and then the teacher can join in any future lessons as needed as well. The previous two slides specifically focused on our process at Cincinnati Children's Hospital for virtual volunteers. This slide lists the steps in a more general manner for easy reference for anyone creating their own program. You will have initial responsibility for identifying the student, connecting them with a tutor, providing guidance on what to do during the lesson, creating the appointments unless you're comfortable with the volunteers doing this step, and finally documenting the results. Today we have shared with you how we found our pool of volunteers to provide virtual tutoring, how we train them, and the day-to-day steps to guide them in subsequent sessions. We are all very eager for the pandemic to be resolved and get back to normal life. Will our virtual tutoring come to an end at that point in time? No, we have found this to be a valuable tool that we will want to keep in our toolbox to use. How do we think we'll use it? Currently, we use virtual tutors for our inpatient students. From time to time, we have patients who discharge from the hospital that were not able to connect with a home instructor or any teacher, and we do not have the resources to continue teaching. For example, if a student discharges from the hospital to the Ronald McDonald House, Cincinnati Public Schools is the district of residence and is required to provide home instruction. However, if this student is only going to be at the Ronald McDonald House for about 3 to 4 weeks, this is not enough time to get home instruction started. If the school that they come from back at home is not able to send a teacher because of long distance and virtual instruction doesn't work with them with their home school, we now can connect them with a virtual tutor to meet their needs. We are working to get this program implemented as we speak. In addition, we have volunteers who want to help, but it's very difficult or impossible for them to travel to the hospital to volunteer. We can now look at continuing to involve these volunteers from long distance using virtual tutoring. We have patients who have home instructors and have instruction with their school set up, but they're really struggling with some things and could use a little extra help. We can look now and are beginning to do so at involving virtual tutoring as a supplemental help for students that need it. Virtual tutoring is a tool that we can tap into as well to meet the needs of students that find that this is a good way for them to learn. Again, this is just another tool in the toolbox that we want to keep around. What are some ways that you might use it in your hospital even after the pandemic has ended? For sure, the pandemic has challenged everyone, and some more than others. What brings us joy is finding new ways to make an impact and reach students and to share it with you. The pandemic has caused the world to change in many ways. The teachers that are part of the Center for School Services at Cincinnati Children's Hospital have had to adapt and be flexible. The positive outcome is the development of a new program and way to reach students that we shared with you today. We hope you heard something that may help you improve meeting the needs of your students. Do you have any questions that you want to ask us? We would love to hear from you. Here's how you can reach us. The Director of Volunteer Services here at our hospital has also been a great partner, and she provided us permission to share her contact information. We thank you for your time, and we hope you have new tools to reach your patients. Have a great day.